What's up, everybody? Thank you for being a part of our third annual wholesale fruit tree program this year. I wanted to make this video for those of you who are new to the whole bare root fruit tree thing to make sure that you have the best success possible with them. First of all, you're gonna wanna soak the bare roots in water for a few hours, overnight, really deeply rehydrate those roots because they've been kind of traumatized a little bit in this process. You can use a bucket, a bin, a bathtub, whatever you got laying around, just soak the actual roots themselves, nothing above the root flare, which is where the trunk of the tree starts to flare outward. And that's where we want to plant the tree as well, at ground level, at that root flare. Now, while your trees are soaking, if you haven't already dug your holes yet, I highly encourage you to think about the exact best placement of all of these trees. And if you're not sure where exactly to put these trees, here are some tips to help you make those decisions. The hot summer sun out here kills your trees faster than anything else. So the most important thing is to make sure that your trees get protected directly overhead and to the west. This shades them from the hottest part of the day during the summertime when the sun goes directly overhead and then sets in the northwest quadrant. To create that shade, you can use existing buildings, existing trees, permanent structures, or temporary shade structures, which we will offer to the community beginning in April or so. The following trees from this year's program can take the full summer sun and serve as linemen to protect your more sensitive trees, but only once they have matured into big trees themselves. So think about planting them to the west of the more sensitive trees whenever possible. These are also listed in order from largest to smallest. Mulberries, figs, olives, jujubes, chalopsis, which is the desert willow native to the Sonoran Desert, pomegranates, and grapevines. Yes, all of those can take the full summer sun out here as long as you mulch the surrounding soil with a good thick layer of wood chip mulch and water deeply. All these trees grow pretty fast, so you can't really go wrong with any of them. The one thing that I would note, figs can take a little bit longer to start growing. They're typically known for having like a year where they're just establishing their root system. And then in the following year, they'll start taking off and then they really start growing fast. One other note is that jujubes have a pretty filtered canopy. So whereas the other trees are gonna produce a lot of shade, like really good shade, the jujube, same thing with the pomegranate, the jujube and the pomegranate tend to let in filtered light more, kind of like a palo verde. That's good when you want that sunlight to get through, but it's not going to be as effective of a shade barrier, a sun and heat barrier during the summertime for the more sensitive trees planted to the east of it. And then pretty much everything else in our program this year is going to be more sensitive and it's going to require some type of support, especially in the first summer. A lot of these trees are gonna want afternoon shade pretty much their entire life. Maybe after 5 years of making it through the brutal summers, you know, you don't have to shade them anymore. And there are some select varieties like the mid-pride peach that, I mean, this mid-pride peach that I have here on the property, I only shaded it its very first summer. And then the second summer, 2025, it took the sun all summer long, didn't even drop a leaf. And that's because I'm watering it deeply. I've amended the soil. I've created good, healthy soil. We're harvesting rainwater into the root zone of this peach tree. And it's got that thick layer of mulch all the way around to really keep the soil temperature and the soil moisture where we want it. If you ordered some of the more experimental varieties, think blackberries, or even more so raspberries, blueberries, then you'll want to be even more careful. So in short, use your big desert hardy trees to establish microclimates that your more sensitive fruit trees can be really happy in. You're trying to cool the overall temperature, the microclimate of your yard, cool it down in the summertime so that things aren't stressing out. All right, so now you know how to think about you planning your layout and where each tree would be best. Now it's time to actually dig the holes while your trees are still soaking and rehydrating in that water that you put them in. Tips here, dig square holes because square holes make it easier for the roots to penetrate into the surrounding earth. round holes, especially in very heavy clay soil and caliche, right? Really hard dirt. Round holes just basically act like a pot. And so the roots could end up just circling inside of that hole, never breaking out. So square corners, you know, on your hole really help the roots know that they're supposed to go and figure it out for themselves in that hard dirt. The harder your soil is in that area, the more you're going to want to amend, the more you're going to want to break up, decompact the surrounding soil. You got to go wider with your hole. If you have really good soft soil, then you don't necessarily need to dig as wide of a hole. But typically the recommended distance is like 2 to 3 times the width of your actual root system. And one pro tip is I always recommend whatever soil you're digging out, put it onto a tarp or into containers, wheelbarrow, whatever, because when it's time to backfill that hole with that soil, it's gonna be a pain in the neck. You're gonna be ripping your hair out if you just dumped it everywhere in the grass around you. So be very intentional about where you're placing that soil that's coming out of the hole. You don't need to go super deep. Trees typically wanna send out roots laterally. You wanna go just as deep as the longest root on your tree. You can go a little bit deeper and break it up, but you want to kind of compact it back down. And the reason for that is that after planting, as you're watering the tree will actually settle. All of the earth that it's planted in is going to settle back down. And so for that reason, we want to pack things in really tight for minimal settling, because if it goes too deep, then you could start to bury the trunk of the tree. You could start to kind of flood the trunk of the tree, and that's not good. Once your holes are dug, it's time to test your drainage. You're going to fill your hole all the way to the top with water, and you're going to track how many hours it takes for that water to completely disappear into the surrounding earth. Unless you know for sure that you have good drainage, I highly recommend doing this. Plus, it just stores extra water into the surrounding dirt. If it takes more than like 12 hours, your drainage is considered poor, which can lead to root rot if you plant a tree there just like that. So you're going to want to further break up the surrounding earth or choose a different location. Once you know you're planting in a hole with good drainage, your bare roots have been soaking in water for a few hours, they're really rehydrated, it's time to actually plant the tree into the hole. You're gonna wanna hold it nice and high. If you have 2 people, ideal. If not, you can make it work with 1, but you wanna kind of hold it up nice and high as you start backfilling. A lot of times soil manufacturers will tell you to put 50% compost in the hole. That's really not necessary. You know, this stuff is super bioactive. It's very rich. And so you really only need like 10 to maybe 25% soil amendment in your hole. What that's gonna do is that's gonna let the tree figure it out for itself, that it doesn't just get this nice friendly compost to grow in. It has to grow in the native soil, and it has to expand outside of the hole to go finding water and nutrients. So basically you don't want to amend it too much, because then you're creating conditions that are too favorable in the immediate surrounding, and the tree can be slower to establish in the surrounding area. With that said, definitely throw in a couple scoops of this stuff or whatever soil you've got. Hopefully it's local, hopefully it's alive, because bagged soil from the box stores is not alive. And you throw in a couple scoops into your hole, that's gonna help kickstart the soil microbial life all around that area. And it's the exchange between the soil microbes and the plant roots that creates what's called the rhizosphere. So as you're planting your tree, backfilling with that amended soil, you want to keep it nice and high. And you're going to keep compacting, packing down around the roots. You want the soil to be tight in that hole. Again, we do not want the tree to sink after having been planted. So packing the soil in real tight will keep the tree upright and really make it feel like it grew there on its own. That's what we want. We want the tree to wake up feeling like it's grown there its entire life. That's what's gonna anchor it best and give it the best shot of taking off. Don't be afraid to actually step your entire body weight on the soil as you're packing it in. Don't worry, even if you're 500 pounds, you are not heavy enough to create bad compaction in the soil. You're creating good compaction. Again, we're anchoring that tree into place so that it will not move, and in theory, should not need stakes. Once you've packed it all the way in, water in your tree. Hopefully you have extra native soil around that you can place as a berm. You can build a berm, a well around your tree to fill that well with water to basically flood the root zone of your tree. That's how you're gonna get it to really wake up and take off as fast as possible. And by the way, we almost always want to prune back a significant portion of the tree's canopy when we're planting bare root, because pulling trees out of the ground at the wholesale nursery that we order from kind of damages the root systems, right? It's like a little traumatic to them. And so it's out of balance. There's now this big above ground tree with a diminished root system. And so we prune back. Don't worry, you want to do this. Your tree wants this, and your tree will actually grow faster and healthier when you prune the canopy back. So if you haven't done that by this point and your tree's already planted in the ground, then go ahead and do that now. The way that you can decide which branches you should prune is to create space in the canopy. So if you see branches that are kind of overlapping or branches that are growing inward or growing at a weird angle, those are typically the ones to prune off. And as far as where to prune on the branch, you always want to find a little leaf node. You'll see these leaf nodes at various intervals along a branch. You want to go just above one of those nodes, and keep in mind that whichever node you prune above, a new branch will grow out of that node in whatever direction the node is facing. And so you want to be careful not to prune above a node that's going inward towards the tree. You want to prune above nodes that are pointing outward so that you get a nice branching structure on your tree. And that's it. Your tree's planted, right place. Now it's time to mulch. So if you haven't already picked up mulch, you can hit us up, or you can find mulch at the Worm Farm, Growers Best Organics, wherever you want to get it. You can get a chip drop, free, chipdrop.com, but get a nice thick layer of wood chip mulch. I'm talking like 6 inches at least, all around your tree. Keep it off of the trunk so that moisture is not trapped against the trunk, but thick wood chip mulch all the way around the tree. And then if you've built that berm, you can continue to flood your tree well with water maybe once a week for the first 2-3 weeks. And then you can kind of space it out a little bit more until it starts getting hot. And then once a week is good. A note about watering trees. Trees want water at 3-foot depth. How do we know that we're watering at 3 feet deep? You got to get a soil probe. You can make a soil probe out of some DIY stuff, whatever you got laying around. You can buy a soil probe for, I think, like 20 to 40 bucks, right? It's something with a handle, with a long metal rod, and you just stick it in, and where it sticks, that's where the water hasn't softened the soil. And so you can pull it back out and see, okay, we're at about 2 feet deep. We have to keep watering. So let's talk about irrigation. The gold standard in the Sonoran Desert, basically anywhere in Arizona where it gets hot, is automated drip irrigation. You can use mushroom bubblers to flood your well, or you can use the smaller emitters, but you want to run them for long enough that the water gets to penetrate, which means you have to make sure that you've either got a berm or that the water's not just running off based on the grade, right? And so if you can set up an automated irrigation system, that is going to be ideal, because, and especially if you get a smart timer that you can check from your phone and control from your phone, that way you can always make sure that your trees are getting water. In the summertime, it is a game of a day. You miss one watering in the summer, and you go from abundant harvest to a little bit of kindling for your next fire. If you don't have an automated irrigation system yet, that is something that we can help install. But in the meantime, you can use a hose. You can just drag a hose over and just put it on a trickle. This is one of the most common causes of trees not growing, is they're just not getting enough water. Double, triple the water that you're giving them, and just, like I said, put your hose or whatever your water source is on a trickle and let it run for hours. In our heavy clay soil down here in Phoenix and in some surrounding areas, that is the only way to get the water to penetrate as deep as the trees need it to. If you're gonna build your own automated irrigation system, make sure that you use swing pipe instead of that flimsy drip tubing that cracks easily and you just start chasing leaks all over your yard, swing pipe is practically the same price. It's a thicker polyurethane. You can poke into it still for your 1/4 inch lines, but you can actually use it in place of PVC as your main supply line anywhere past the valves. So you got your PVC from your main to your valves, and then you can use swing pipe beyond that. It's way better than PVC in terms of working with it. It doesn't crack like the cheap drip tubing, the flimsy stuff. So highly recommend swing pipe. And remember that as the tree grows over the years, you want to expand where you're watering. Trees have evolved feeder roots that go seeking for rainwater that rains on the tree and gets pushed out by the leaf canopy and pushed out to the edge of the canopy, right? So you want to water out there. That's where the tree's feeder roots are. That's where they're looking for water, and that's where your tree is going to have the most success, is watering further and further away from it over the course of time. Yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got. Those are the main things that I wanted to make sure that you were aware of. If you have any more questions, you can drop them in the comments. You can send me an email. Comments are cool because then I can reply and other people can also learn from my answer to your comment. Other people probably have the same question as you. And yeah, if you follow all of these steps, you will have abundant harvests for your family and your neighbors and friends and whoever you want for decades to come. So thank you again for being a part of this wholesale fruit tree program this year. And on Saturday and Sunday, March 7th and 8th, we're gonna be hosting a big planting event in the Phoenix Food Forest. It's in West Central Phoenix off of 36th Avenue in Fillmore. There's gonna be food trucks, raffle prizes. You're gonna learn how to implement all of this stuff in the real world. You're gonna learn from tree experts, permaculture experts who are gonna guide us all on planting, watering, etc. It's gonna be a really, really fun time. So come volunteer, help us plant out these city easements in this West Phoenix neighborhood, the Phoenix Food Forest Initiative. We'll see you there.